So let's talk about 5 things people learn too late in life. Not because I want to depress you, but because if you're hearing this now, you still have time. First, busyness is not a badge of honor. I spent years wearing exhaustion like a trophy, believing that the more overworked and overwhelmed I was, the more valuable I must be. Research tells us otherwise. Studies on burnout show that chronic stress doesn't just steal our energy. It rewires our brain, making us less creative, less connected, and ironically less productive. The hardest truth, no one gives you a gold medal for running yourself into the ground.
Oh.
At some point, we have to ask, are we building a life or are we just surviving one? I used to think that if I wasn't busy, I wasn't trying hard enough, that if my schedule wasn't packed, if I wasn't running from one commitment to the next, I was somehow failing. Because in our culture, being busy isn't just normal, it's glorified. We hear it in conversations every day. How are you? Swamped. Same. So busy, it's just nonstop. And we say it like it's a good thing, like exhaustion equals importance. But here's the thing. Being busy and being fulfilled are not the same thing. The research is clear. Chronic busyness, this never-ending cycle of doing, activates the brain stress response. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for detecting threats, goes into overdrive, keeping us in a low-grade state of fight or flight. Over time, this constant activation rewires neural pathways, making it harder for us to concentrate, solve problems, and even experience joy. But we don't need a scientific study to prove it. We can feel it. How many of us have been so caught up in the momentum of work, responsibilities, and obligations that we suddenly look up and wonder, when did I last have a real conversation with someone I love? When did I last feel excited about something? When did I last feel anything other than tired? And it's not just our minds that pay the price. Our relationships do too. Studies show that people who report higher levels of time scarcity, feeling like there's never enough time, also report lower relationship satisfaction. Because when we're stretched too thin, the first things to go are the ones that require presence, deep conversations, playful moments, the kind of connection that happens in the in-between. I learned this the hard way. There was a time when I said yes to everything, every opportunity, every favor, every extra project, until I was so overextended that I wasn't really there for anything. I'd be at dinner with my family, but my mind was racing through my to-do list. I'd say yes to a coffee with a friend, but spend half the time answering emails under the table. I was doing all the things, but I wasn't in any of them. And then one day, my daughter looked at me and said, "Mom, you're always working." She didn't say it with resentment. She just said it like it was a fact. And that's what broke me because she was right. I was always working, not just at my job, but at proving my worth, proving I was needed, proving I could do it all. That was the moment I realized busy doesn't equal valuable. It just equals busy. Busy. So why do we do this? Why do we keep piling on more, convincing ourselves that if we just push a little harder, we'll finally feel like we've made it? Because deep down, many of us believe that rest is lazy. That slowing down means falling behind, that if we stop even for a second, everything will come crashing down. But the truth, rest is not a luxury. It's not a reward for finishing everything on our to-do list. It's a requirement for living a full life. Research on high performers, CEOs, athletes, artists shows that the ones who sustain success, who don't just achieve but thrive, are the ones who prioritize rest as much as effort. And not just sleep, true rest. Time spent in nature, meaningful conversations, creative outlets that have no productivity value whatsoever. Moments of stillness where we're not doing, fixing, or achieving anything. We're just being. Because at the end of the day, no one will stand at our funeral and say, "She was amazing. She answered emails at 11 p.m. and never took a break." They'll talk about the moments we were with them, the way we laughed, the way we made them feel. So maybe it's time we stop treating exhaustion like a status symbol. Maybe it's time we start measuring our days not by how much we did, but by how present we were, because a full life isn't the same as a busy one. And the best things, they happen in the pauses. Second, emotional avoidance is expensive. The things we push down don't disappear. They just show up in places we don't expect. Unprocessed grief becomes irritability. Buried shame becomes perfectionism. Suppressed fear becomes control. The research is clear. Avoiding hard emotions doesn't make us stronger. It makes us numb. And a numb life is not a full life. Most of us were taught in one way or another that some emotions are acceptable and others should be avoided at all costs. Be happy, be grateful, be strong, but don't be angry, don't be sad, and definitely don't be vulnerable. Somewhere along the way, we learned that negative emotions make us weak. That feeling too much is dangerous. And that if we just keep moving, keep pushing, keep ignoring the hard stuff, it'll go away. But it doesn't. Our emotions are like unpaid debts. They don't disappear just because we pretend they're not there. They collect interest. They grow in the dark and eventually they demand to be paid. There's a study that looked at the effects of emotional suppression when we actively try to push down feelings like sadness, anxiety, or fear. The results: people who suppress their emotions don't just experience higher stress levels. They also have weaker immune systems, lower relationship satisfaction, and a higher likelihood of developing chronic illness. Because emotions are not just psychological. They live in the body, and when we don't process them, they don't just go away. They manifest in other ways. Like that moment when someone cuts you off in traffic and suddenly you're furious. Not just annoyed, full-body white-hot rage. And it doesn't make sense. But if you trace it back, you realize it's not just about traffic. It's about every moment that week when you felt powerless. It's about the meeting where you swallowed your frustration. It's about the fight with your partner that you pretended didn't hurt. Or maybe it shows up as perfectionism. You convince yourself you have to be the best at everything. You have to be polished, accomplished, untouchable. Because if you slow down, if you allow yourself to feel the things you've been running from, what happens? Maybe you realize you're terrified of failing. Maybe you realize you don't feel good enough. And so we keep performing. We keep controlling. We keep avoiding because facing the truth feels too big, too overwhelming. But here's what I've learned. Emotions don't destroy us. The fear of feeling them does. We have this idea that if we open the door to our real feelings, they'll flood in and drown us. But emotions don't work that way. They come in waves. And when we allow ourselves to actually feel them, when we name them, sit with them, process them, they pass. They lose their power. I remember a moment years ago when I was feeling completely overwhelmed. Like everything in my life was too much. Like I was failing at everything that mattered. My instinct was to push through, to keep going, to not feel it. But instead, I sat down and wrote out exactly what I was feeling. And what shocked me wasn't how big the emotions were. It was how quickly they softened the moment I acknowledged them. Because emotions just want to be heard. So what do we do with this? How do we start actually processing our emotions instead of running from them? We name them. Studies show that simply labeling an emotion, saying, I feel anxious or I feel hurt, reduces its intensity in the brain. It gives us clarity. And when we have clarity, we can respond. Instead of just reacting, we get curious. Instead of judging our emotions, I shouldn't feel this way. We ask, why am I feeling this? What is this trying to tell me? Because emotions aren't obstacles. They're data. They're messengers. And we allow them to move through us. Whether that means writing them down, talking to someone we trust, or simply sitting in silence and feeling what needs to be felt. Because when we stop running and we stop numbing, something incredible happens. We get our life back. We start experiencing real joy, real connection, real peace. And isn't that what we're actually chasing? Not a life where we avoid pain, but a life where we feel all of it, where we get to be fully, deeply, unapologetically alive. Aired people are not thinking about you as much as you think they are. The fear of judgment keeps too many of us small. But studies on the spotlight effect prove that people aren't watching us nearly as closely as we imagine. While we're agonizing over a misstep, everyone else is too busy thinking about their own. Once we realize this, we can stop performing, stop editing, and start showing up as who we actually are. I spent years believing that every misstep, every awkward moment, every imperfection was on full display for the world to see. If I stumbled over my words in a meeting, I'd replay it 100 times in my head, convinced that everyone else was doing the same. If I walked into a room and didn't know anyone, I'd assume that people were noticing how out of place I felt. It was like I was walking through life under a spotlight, and every mistake, every flaw was being broadcast in high definition. But then I came across a study that changed everything. Researchers call it the spotlight effect. This tendency we have to vastly overestimate how much other people notice us. In one experiment, they asked participants to wear a bright, embarrassing t-shirt and walk into a room full of strangers. The participants were convinced that everyone in the room would remember what they were wearing. But when the researchers asked the strangers afterward, most people hadn't even noticed. Let that sink in. We think everyone is watching us, critiquing us, analyzing our every move, but most of the time they're not. They're thinking about themselves just like we are. And yet, how many of us let this fear, this illusion of constant scrutiny hold us back? We edit ourselves, second guess us ourselves, shrink ourselves down. We hold back from raising our hand, from sharing our ideas, from dancing like an idiot at weddings, because we're afraid of what other people will think. But here's the truth. Most people aren't thinking about us nearly as much as we imagine. And the ones who are, they're usually not the ones we need to be living for. I remember a time early in my career when I gave a talk at a conference. I walked off stage, convinced I had bombed. I had stumbled over a few words, lost my train of thought for half a second, and for the rest of the day, I felt sick about it. I kept picturing the audience whispering, "Did you see that? She totally messed up." But later that night, I ran into someone who had been in the audience and she said, "That was amazing. When you shared that story about fear, it really hit me. I've been struggling with the same thing. Not one word about my fumbled sentence, not one comment about the things I had obsessed over. Because no one had been watching me as closely as I had been watching me. The more I see this play out, the more I realize how much time we waste worrying about things that don't matter. That person you were awkward around at the party, they've already moved on. That time you mispronounced a word, no one's still thinking about it. That moment you replay in your head at 2 a.m., everyone else has long forgotten. And the irony, the more we let go of this fear, the more magnetic we become. Because real confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being unbothered, from knowing that we are worthy whether we nail it or not. So what would happen if we let go of the performance? If we stop filtering, stop rehearsing, stop walking through life as if we're on stage? What if we decided right now that we don't need to prove anything because the people who matter don't need us to be perfect? They just need us to be real. And the people who demand perfection, they're too busy worrying about themselves to actually be paying attention to us anyway. Fourth, success without fulfillment feels empty. We're told to chase achievement, to work hard, to climb the ladder, and many of us do. But at some point, we look around and wonder, why doesn't this feel as good as I thought it would? Because success without meaning, without connection, without a sense of purpose. For years, I believed that if I just achieved enough, I'd finally feel whole. If I worked hard, got the right opportunities, checked all the boxes, I'd wake up one day feeling complete. So, I ran hard. I hustled. I collected gold stars like my worth depended on it. And for a while, it worked. The promotions, the praise, the external validation. It felt good until it didn't. I remember sitting in my office after a particularly big career milestone, one of those moments I had been working toward for years. I should have been thrilled. I should have felt like I had made it. Instead, I felt nothing. Not sadness, not excitement, just a strange hollow feeling like I had reached the top of a mountain, only to realize there was nothing up there. And that moment forced me to ask a question I had been avoiding. What am I actually chasing? Because here's the thing, achievement in and of itself isn't the problem. Working hard isn't the problem. The problem is when we attach our entire sense of worth to the next goal, the next milestone, the next pat on the back. The problem is when we assume that success equals happiness, when in reality, success without fulfillment is just well-packaged burnout. Research backs this up. Studies on happiness show that external achievements, money, status, accolades, do bring a temporary boost in well-being, but it's fleeting. Like a sugar rush, it spikes and then crashes, leaving us chasing the next hit. True lasting fulfillment comes from something else entirely. It comes from meaning, from connection, from being aligned with our values. I once interviewed a highly successful executive who had built everything he thought he wanted: wealth, influence, power. On paper, he had won. But when I asked him what he would have done differently, he sighed and said, "I wish I had spent more time on things that actually mattered." He told me about the birthdays he missed, the friendships that faded, the way he had been so focused on getting somewhere that he forgot to enjoy where he already was. And that's what so many of us do. We get caught in this loop of when, or then thinking when I get the promotion, then I'll feel secure. When I buy the house, then I'll feel successful. When I reach this level, then I'll finally relax. But the goalposts keep moving. And if we're not careful, we wake up one day and realize we've been chasing a finish line that doesn't actually exist. So, what does fulfillment actually look like? It looks like aligning our work with our values, choosing careers, projects, and goals that actually mean something to us. Not just what looks impressive from the outside. It looks like making space for joy, not waiting until we deserve it, but choosing to experience it now in the messy, unfinished middle of things. It looks like prioritizing people over productivity, because at the end of the day, no one remembers our resume, but they do remember how we made them feel. And it looks like defining success for ourselves, not by someone else's standards, not by society's expectations, but by what actually makes us feel alive. Because success is not a finish line. It's not a checklist. It's not something we finally arrive at. It's in the way we live, the way we show up, the way we stay present for the things that actually matter. And if we miss that, we miss everything. Fifth, time is not a renewable resource. We act like we have forever, like we can put off the things that matter, our dreams, our relationships, our joy until some mythical later. When life is less chaotic, when we feel more ready, when everything is perfectly in place. But later is not a guarantee. And the truth we learn too late is that the things we keep postponing, they're the things that make life worth living. I once heard someone say, the trouble is you think you have time. And doesn't that hit hard? Because we do. We live like there will always be another chance to say, I love you. To start the thing we've been too scared to start. To take the trip, to have the hard conversation, to show up for the people we care about, until one day we realize that the chances have run out. I've spent years studying vulnerability, connection, and courage. And if there's one theme that comes up again and again, it's regret. Not over the things people did, but the things they didn't do. The words left unsaid, the dreams left unexplored, the relationships that slipped away because no one made the first move. There is research on this because of course there is. Studies show that at the end of life, people don't regret the failures nearly as much as they regret the opportunities they never took, the risks they never said yes to. The times they played small, played safe, convinced themselves they had more time. I've seen this up close. A few years ago, a friend of mine lost someone suddenly. No warning, no time to prepare, just gone. And as we sat together in the days that followed, what haunted her wasn't the big dramatic moments. It was the small ones. The time she didn't pick up the phone. The time she assumed there'd be another dinner, another weekend, another chance. And I think about that all the time, about how easy it is to move through life assuming we'll get around to the things that really matter. One day I'll take that trip. One day I'll finally start writing that book. One day I'll reach out and fix that friendship. But what if one day never comes? What if one day never comes? What if we stopped acting like time was infinite? What if we treated it like the precious non-renewable resource that it is? Because the reality is we're spending it no matter what. The question is, are we spending it on the things that actually matter? It's easy to get caught in the trap of waiting for a start. Waiting until we feel ready, waiting for the fear to go away. But readiness is a myth. And fear is just proof that something matters. The people who live the fullest lives aren't the ones who waited for fear to disappear. They're the ones who move forward in spite of it. So what does that look like in real life? It looks like making the call, sending the text, taking the risk. It looks like putting ourselves in the arena knowing we might fail, but deciding that the worst failure would be never trying at all. It looks like choosing joy now. Not when we've earned it, not when everything is perfect. Now, because the small ordinary moments, the laughter over dinner, the sun on our face, the quiet conversations with people we love, those are the things we'll wish we had more of. And it looks like living in a way that if tomorrow wasn't promised, we'd still be proud of today. Because in the end, we don't get more time. We just get this one wild, messy, beautiful life, and the only thing worse than running out of it is realizing we never truly lived it. So here we are. 5 lessons people learn too late. 5 truths that if we really let them in can change the way we live now, not someday. Because that's the point, isn't it? Life isn't waiting. It's happening right here, right now. We spend so much time afraid of what people think, of failing, of not being enough. We chase things that don't fulfill us, hold back when we should lean in, assume we have more time than we do. But what if we stopped? What if we really started showing up not for some perfect, polished version of life, but for the messy, beautiful, real thing? Because at the end of the day, it's not about being fearless. It's about being brave, brave enough to be seen, brave enough to choose meaning over achievement, brave enough to live like time is precious, because it is. So here's my challenge to you. Take one of these lessons and make it real in your life. Not next year, not next month. Now, choose vulnerability, redefine success. Let go of the fear of being judged. Say the thing that needs to be said. Do the thing that scares you. Because one day you'll look back, and when you do, I hope you'll know you didn't just exist, you lived.